A little background about myself, because I think it's important that you should know. I live in Brooklyn, New York, but it was a big journey. I was born in Cairo, Egypt, in the northern coast of Africa. My father's family is originally from Syria. They went to Yerushalayim to Cairo. My mother's family is from Odessa, the Ukraine. They ran away from the Bolshevik Revolution in the 1920s and settled in Cairo. There was about 70,000 Ashkenaz Jews in Cairo. My father and my uncles in the 1940s were Talmidim of Rabbi Yosef. His first position after finishing Bet Midrash, Porat Yosef in Yerushalayim, was to become Av Beit Din of Egypt. And he served there in an amazing capacity. But because war was going to break out soon, he decided to go back to Israel. So my grandmother, my father's mother, had 9 children. She took 4 with her to Israel, 4 boys and a girl, leaving behind 4 other boys. And my father was the one who remained behind because he was concerned that the Muslims should not desecrate and destroy the synagogues, because he loved his synagogue and he kept an eye on it. We were there in the middle of the 6-day war. My father was imprisoned because he committed the crime of being born a Jew. And all Jews were imprisoned. And Baruch Hashem, the guy named Nathan Lewin, who was responsible to save every Jewish life, he called. I didn't know this. For 40 years, I used to ask my mother, why do you have Spanish passports? And then here I am, I was living in Miami Beach, and they had the 40th anniversary edition of the 6-Day War in the Hamodia, and the cover story was the Spanish Angel of Mercy, and they told the story. The Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva in Brooklyn, Rambam Kalmanowitz, found out that Nasser, the dictator in Egypt, was going to kill all the Jews. And he called the State Department and he said, what are you doing about it? They're about to kill all the Jews. Who answered the phone? A young man who was in Harvard Law School at the time, Nathan Lewin. He would go on to save Rubashkin. He's a constitutional scholar. He came up with a brilliant idea. He said, I'm going to call this dictator in Spain, Franco. I'm going to ask him to do us a favor. I read that he has charata, he has regret over the Spanish Inquisition. He feels bad about what happened to the Jews 500 years ago. And he calls him and he goes, I'll do it. I'm going to give every Jew a passport. And they have to go to Barcelona, and from there they can decide where they want to go. But no one is allowed to make any kind of statements that they're going to Israel. Otherwise the deal's off. Baruch Hashem, because of that, he saved my family, saved our lives. So Baruch Hashem, we got to New York. And when we got to New York, I was telling the rabbi, when I was 12 years old, one of the Gedolei Hador moved into our area. Rabbi Miller. He would go on to change the world. So when I was 12, I became one of his students. I went on to become his student until the day he passed away, 2001. I learned a lot from him. He encouraged me to teach. I taught at University of Miami. I became a physician. I was an orthopedic surgeon for many, many years. And I spent my time half day learning and half day working. I had the opportunity and the privilege to teach many young men. Many of them came and girls too, but more young men, about how to live, how to date. I became sort of an expert at dating. And until Torah Anytime discovered me, in Tereb L'Ayin Hara, I have over 550 shurim just on dating and Shalom Bayit. Although I can handle any subject, thank God. And that's it. I mean, I learned from my life that a Jew has to give back. A Jew has to be communal. A Jew was born not for himself, but to help others. This is what Mahus is. That's what Yehudi is all about. So when I was speaking to Zach, we've had the privilege to learn together for the past month. Let's do something in Philly. Let's make it happen. So we said, how about we do a little push on Yom Kippur? So here we go. So with your kind permission, I'd like to share an amazing story with you. There's a fellow on a plane going to Houston. And his name is Friedman. And the stewardess says, Mr. Friedman, I have a kosher meal for you. I said, sure. The guy has been away for 2 weeks. And he was missing his wife's food. And he's not looking forward to a kosher meal on a plane. But you do what you do. What are you going to do? So then he went to wash his hands in the back. And the guy sitting next to him was digging into a nice tray piece of steak. Yeah, and he's like, look what I have to eat. Double wrap, probably was cooked a year ago. You know what I'm saying? And he notices that the guy's name is Weinstein. So he says to himself, should I tell the guy, he's Jewish probably, he can order a kosher meal. So he says, Mr. Weinstein, I see you're Jewish. He says, yeah. You know, they offer kosher meals on the plane. Not interested. Leave me alone. No, I don't eat anything kosher. What do you mean? He says, you have to understand, whatever God says to do, I do the opposite. The opposite. If it's to eat kosher, I eat treif. I don't keep Shabbos, I don't do anything. I don't understand. He said, what's going on? He said, you really want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. He could tell that the guy had an accent from Eastern Europe. And he starts to tell him, I kept everything until my son. Once I lost my son, that's it. So he says to him, what's the story? And he tells him, I was in Auschwitz. And we knew that the war was almost over. It was only a few weeks left for liberation. It was me, my wife, and my son, Kasriel Menachem. And I held on to him tight. One day, the Gestapo, rather the German Nazi soldiers came around and he said, follow us. And they took us to an area that was clear in the forest. And my son was gripping my hand so tight, I thought I was going to cut off the circulation. And then made us stand there and they started shooting. And there was people dying everywhere. I survived. But I never saw my son ever again. But my son was the light of my life. And after that I said, that's it. It's enough. No more Judaism for me. So there you have it. Brushing away the tears as he's crying. God said I had to have children. I had children. And he was taken away from me. So now I want to tell you something. Whatever God tells me to do, I do the exact opposite. If he says keep kosher, I eat treif. If he says honor the Shabbos, I drive my car. Whatever he says, I will do the opposite. So he says to himself, what can you do? What do you tell someone like that? Nothing. So the airplane arrives in Houston. They say farewell to each other. 4 years later, this rabbi, he had gone to Houston for a kiruv mission, decided to take his family to Eretz Yisrael to show his wife and children what Israel was like. He was there in yeshiva. And we traveled around the country. We went to Tzfat, we went to Meron, we went to Amuka, all the great places. I took them all over the place. I took them to Bnei Brak to see the famous Panovich Yeshiva, which has this gorgeous Heichal, which is pure gold. You got to see it, it's a sight to see. And then finally, it was time for Yom Kippur. We spent Rosh Hashanah there, Yom Kippur. There's no words to describe the impact of Yom Kippur in Yerushalayim. Not a person in the street. We're all davening. Finally, it's Musaf. We're told you have a 15-minute break. So we want to get some fresh air. And there I was, walking down Me'ah Sha'arim Street with not a soul to be seen, in the direction of Malchei Yisrael. Malchei Yisrael is in Geula, if you've been to Israel. It's where they have all the stores. About 50 feet away, that's a girl wanting to tell me how her date went. I can deal with it later. Okay. Ella, I'll call you back. Okay. 50 feet away, I see someone doing something amazing, not normal, in Me'ah Sha'arim, sitting on a bench, smoking on Yom Kippur. As I approached him, I recognized him. Mr. Weinstein, you remember me? I'm Rabbi Gross, we were on the plane together. Yeah, how are you? And we start schmoozing, and we sit, and we talk. I told him, you're the guy that ate the treif meat, remember? He says, yeah. And we're talking about life. You know, today's Yom Kippur. And we're about to say Yizkor for all the dead souls. I know you don't believe it, but please, just once, come with me to my shul, where I'm davening, and we'll say, Al Kilmaya Rachamim for your son, for the deceased. You should know that I haven't been in a shul, he tells him, for about 50 years. I don't even remember what one looks like. Don't worry, I'll hold your hand. We'll go in together. We walked along the quiet streets, and a few people who passed us said hello. We held each other's arms. We approached the shul, we went inside, and I asked the chazan if you could do a special Kelmali Rachman at the end of the laning for my friend's son, my old friend's son, who had died al Kiddush Hashem. The chazan said, yes, I'll do it. Please tell me his name. Yes, my son's name was Kisir Menachem ben Yecheskel Shraga. The chazan's face turned white. Beads of sweat came down his forehead. And he fainted. They had to bring water to revive him. He looks at the old man and he says, Tati! It was his son.
Wow.
What happened? Mommy stood in front of the Nazi officers and took the bullets and saved my life. They had been disconnected close to 45 years. And that began that man's path back to tshuva. Yom Kippur teaches us there's a possibility for everything. He's a religious man today. The Gemara relates in Avodah Zarah a famous story. And we're all adults, so we can talk about this. There was a fellow named Eliezer ben Dodaya. Eliezer ben Dodaya, safe to say, tried every prostitute in the world. But there was one, she was considered the Cadillac. Right? And he had to get to her. Right? And then he got to her. She says to him, look at you. There's no hope for you. You're a loser. Reza Dedaya didn't know what to say. A filthy harlot tells him he's a loser. A loser. He ran to the mountains. He ran to the hills and he cried, please, mountains and hills, ask Hashem to forgive me. And the Gemara tells us, they said, sorry, pal. We got to worry about ourselves. Can't help you. He went to the heaven and earth and he screamed out, heaven and earth, ask Shemaim to forgive me. Sorry. Got to worry about ourselves. Can't worry about you. He shouted to the sun and the moon, please go to Hashem and tell him to forgive me. No. Sorry. Got to worry about ourselves. Can't worry about you. He cried to the stars. Same answer. Can't help you. How can we daven for you? We got to worry about ourselves. We got to daven for ourselves. He put his head between his knees and cried so hard that his neshama left his body. At that moment, a heavenly voice came, a bat call, a bas call, exclaimed, Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya, welcome into Olam Haba. Rabbi! He got the title. He chapped it. En hadavar talui ela bi. It comes down to me. I can't hire people to do things for me. It's nice if I have money and I can pay people to learn Torah and do mitzvahs. That's fine. It's good. It's all good. But no one can excuse you for the work you have to do. No one can excuse me for the work I have to do. It comes down to me. That's the point. The power to do tshuva and accomplish is in our hands. We got to take care of it. We can't rely on anyone else to do it. Got to read you an amazing story. There's a woman, a fabulous writer, Sarah Yocheved Rigler, written a lot for Art Scroll, lives in Israel. Baal Shtuva, right here. What's that? There's that town right before you enter Philly. It's got a lot of schwarzes in it. What is it? Yeah. The one right before in New Jersey. No. Camden. She's from Camden. Exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna have to edit that from the Torah anytime. Anyway. So a few years ago, she made Aliyah many years ago. Listen to this unbelievable story. There was a protest in Yerushalayim. But she didn't know what was going on. She was invited to a Malava Malka in a place called Orient House. I think it's a restaurant in Israel. Anyway, meanwhile, the police came to try to break up protest, and they come with the water cannons. By the way, I saw something amazing on Yeshiva World this morning. A water cannon came, and by mistake was aimed at an old man and a woman in Yerushalayim. They went down like flies. That thing is strong. So I saw it. You got to see it. It's on Yeshiva World. Yeshiva World is a great news site. You got to see it. It was this morning. This morning, the water cannon goes right at the man and woman and flat like a pancake. So anyway, she sees an old man about to get in the way of an Israeli border police who's on a horse, and these horses are big, and she's afraid for the life of the old man. Right? So she says, "What are you doing? You're going to harm the old man." And she says to them, "How you act so violent? When I was in America, I saw police brutality. But you guys are even worse than the American police." What does he say to her? "Tahziri America. Go back to America." Like that. She was so angry, she goes, boom! She slaps the police officer in the face. Guess what? She gets arrested. And they take her down to the police office, right, to the mishtara, and he said, "Okay, what happened?" Well, she says she was irate, she was very nervous. They were almost about to kill an old man, so I told him to get out of the way. And the guy called me, he was not nice to me, so I reacted badly. I'm really sorry. I didn't hear about the matter for 2 years. 2 years later, I get a registered letter from the Israeli government. You're being charged with hitting a policeman, and you must come to court. By the way, it's a crime in Israel to hit a shoter, a policeman. I hired a lawyer, a religious man, and guess what? It's even worse. There's a mandatory prison sentence for hitting a policeman in Israel. I said, "What? I'm the one who was hurt, and I'm going to go to jail?" He provoked me. He insulted me, and I got a cut on my knee, and I still have the scar. But the lawyer said to her calmly, "You confessed at the police station you hit a policeman. You incriminated yourself, right? What did you expect me to do?" she says. "Lie? No, you should have just kept silent. Not said anything." Okay, so what do we do now? And listen to the connection between her and the message that I want to bring out of this story relating to Yom Kippur between us and Hashem. The only way to keep out of jail, the lawyer tells her, is if you throw yourself on the mercy of the court. Listen, it's your first offense. You don't have a history, Baruch Hashem. You have a good chance of getting off. If you admit you made a mistake and promise you won't do it again, more than likely, they'll let you go. And it started to make me think. It was a week before Yom Kippur. And I started remembering the steps of tshuva, like Rabbi told us today, right? First you have to admit the sin, vidui, charata, regret, and then azivat achet, resolve not to do it again. That's the three basic core principles of tshuva. I admit, Hashem, I ate a cheeseburger at McDonald's. I regret it, and with your help, I won't do it anymore. And then I asked, the Yetzer Hara starts getting into our heads, right? Why should I do tshuva? What did I do wrong? It's not my fault. You start to have this kind of cheshbon in your head. The lawyer said, "You were wrong. Admit it. You're not supposed to hit a police officer. This doesn't work that way. But he insulted me." I said to myself on the way home, you know what? He's right. I have to do tshuva. Even if I say I'm sorry to Hashem, it doesn't help. Because why? It's because ben adam la chavero. It's between you and your fellow man. Hashem's not involved in that. You have to figure it out. As soon as I got home, I telephoned my riveting, she said. Of course. She told her face to face, "I'm sorry to hurt you, but you did wrong. You have to do tshuva for striking him." The next day I called my lawyer. "Is there any way to find out the name of the border policeman that I hit?" "Yes, sure," came the response. "It's right here. Let me pull up the chart sheet. It's on the chart sheet. His name is Ronnie Tuito. That's his name." "Well, how do I talk to him?" "Well, just open up the telephone book and look for his number." So, with Yom Kippur only a few days away, I summoned my resolve. It takes a lot of courage. I looked up Tuito Rani in the Yerushalayim phone book. There were 2 listings under that name. So I called the first one. He says, sorry, that's my cousin. And he gave me his number. Great. I said, maybe now I'm off the hook. No, you're not off the hook. You got to call. So the next evening I tried again. A man's voice answered. Is this Ronnie Tuito? I asked. Yes, came the answer in Hebrew. You remember 2 years ago, near Orient House, I slapped you? What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry. Since Yom Kippur is in a few days, I'm more afraid of the Beit Din Shel Shamayim than the court in this world. I'm calling you to ask you for forgiveness. Without even thinking in 2 seconds, he says, Salachti, I forgive you. I felt so good. It's such a great feeling, she writes. This is a Jewish country. Even non-religious policemen understand what's going on this time of the year. This is the time of soul searching for everybody. It doesn't make a difference if you live in Tel Aviv, the Shomron, Yerushalayim, Philadelphia, or New York. We all have the same perspective right now. Thank you, he says to her. And may you and your family be inscribed and sealed for a year of life and good health and blessings. Postscript, what happened to the court appearance? I was sentenced to 2 months, suspended sentence on condition that I never hit a policeman ever again. Okay, when asked for forgiveness, we have to forgive. Right? It's one of the hardest acts. Somebody really hurt us. Somebody embarrassed us. Somebody shamed us. But you have to understand that Hashem runs the world in the midah kineged midah, a turn for a turn. If we forgive, He forgives us. It's a good idea just to sit on the way from New York to Philadelphia. I'm going to tell you the truth. I sat there and I'm standing in the rain. Hashem, I forgive anyone who hurt me this year. Whatever they did, it's fine. Clean. I have nothing against anybody. Because if we have emunah, we know that they were just the agents. I know it's hard. You lost money. This guy took 50,000, and this one caused you a problem, and the neighbor took this and that. You're right. You're absolutely. You could find a million reasons to be justified, but you'll have a much better year and have a much better position tomorrow if you just let go. That's the most important thing. So, Yom Kippur is a day like no other day. The energy of the day is the power of tshuva. One of the most painful moments we can have is that I didn't change this past year. I didn't really work on myself. The same things that bother me are still bothering me. I still lose my patience with my family. Yom Kippur is the time to contemplate your life and evaluate yourself. You stand humble as you list, as the Rabbi told us, you say the Al-Chetz and you think about it. The most important thing is to understand, is to be real with yourself and to be transparent. To come clean and realize who I am and not be afraid. Because tshuva, not everyone gets lucky to do it. I'm going to share with you another amazing story. Listen to this. It's a hot day in India in 2008, in a city called Hardwar, India. Unfortunately, many people who finish Tzahal, where's the first place they run to? India. Many ex-Israeli soldiers. That's where I could find myself. 2 Hasidic men from Israel with long payas and black kippas are walking through the streets. They're all wearing saris. You know how the Indians and Pakistanis, it's called a sari? They're all wearing saris. And they're walking in the street. I mean, they stand out there. It's like an Eskimo in Miami Beach. Payas, long back, big kippas. And their destination is a place called the Ashram of an Adamiya. It's a Avodah Zarah situation. A big temple of Avodah Zarah. It was built by India's most important woman, a saint. They held of her like she was like Lahavdil Kodesh Kodashim in the 20th century. And they were wondering, that's their destination. Are we allowed to go in? because there's idolatry in there. Am I allowed to go into a church? No. Can I walk into a Muslim center? Yes, because there's novelties out there, That's the problem. Standing there, they see the guru. That was the Talmud Muvak of this woman. She passed away in the 1950s, and he took her place. He's 93 years old. Thousands upon thousands of Europeans are waiting online for 10 seconds of his time. And how do you give this guy covered? How do you give a Swami covered? He lifts his leg, his foot, and you take your finger and you dab the bottom of his foot. That's how you show derech eretz to this man. And they're waiting in line for thousands, for 10 seconds of his time. One by one they approach this 93-year-old guru. They bow, and by the way, you can't walk to him. You have to get on your knees and bop there. That's how it works. That's the Hindu gesture of kavod, of honor. And then you walk, and you have to bop back. You're not allowed to walk. The two Hasidic men, Eliezer Bolzer and his friend Nati, are the head of an organization called Bayit Yehudi, Jewish Home. They have Jewish centers throughout India in order to be able to catch these Jewish soldiers, boys and girls who leave Tzahal, and to try to help them. After a few minutes, there's a huge crowd. He sees them by the entrance. And he motions, come, come, come. He's sitting on top on a stone bench. And he invites them, come sit next to me. And they look at him, no, it's okay. We don't want to sit next to you. We're not taking from the bottom of your foot. It's quite okay. And now the debate begins. Sir, we heard you're Jewish. Is that true? Yes. What's your story? People are in shock. All these thousands of tourists have come for him. I was born into a Hasidic family in France, he tells them. My grandparents were Lubliner Hasidim. It's a beautiful town. I've been there in Poland. He went to Talmud Torah. He was raised from all the way. In his 20s, he abandoned Yiddishkeit. He became a doctor. Then the Holocaust came, and he says, I had to run away. I took my tefillin, chucked it in the garbage. Why'd you come to India? They asked him. He said that after the war, he had to get on a ship and run away because the Nazis were invading France. So he went to the port. And he got on a ship to go to Israel because Israel was now, becoming a country. A woman asked me, he said, why are you going there? You're going from one war to another war. Find another place to travel. So he told her, where should I go? He says, why don't you try India? Nice country, no anti-Semitism there. In 1951, at the age of 36, he became a student of this woman, Anadamiya, who was the head guru in India. She passed away. He was promoted to Cohen Gadol. Now begins the debate. Follow along. He looks at them. You all both agree that there's two levels of spirituality. There's the lower level, which is religion. That's low. Believing in God is low, he says. The higher level is believing in the oneness of everything. Would you not agree? He tells them. So these are not stupid people. Eliezer says to him, a very good point. There are two levels of love, right? There's the higher level and the lower level. There's the love for every person in the world, that's the high level. And there's the love, the lower level, for your wife and children and family. And they said to him, if you can't love your own family, you can't love the whole world. So he says, you're Jewish, my friend. Before you go out and love the Indians and the Puerto Ricans, try loving the Jews. Because you're a Jew. That's your family. Now, the Gabayim are getting nervous. He's losing the debate. And they want us get these guys out of here. And they're trying to move them out. And he tells the Gabayim, no, it's okay. Leave them. Let's continue the conversation. Let me ask you a question. They asked him, what did your mother call you when you were a child? Tears came in his eyes, and he says, my name was Avrimka, for Avram Yitzchak. Do you remember a Shabbos table, they asked him? 70 years it had been since he started singing Eshes Chayil, and he did it by heart. He remembered the whole thing. Eshes Chayil. He closed his eyes, he could remember the whole thing, with tears streaming down his face. The two Gabayim, the attendants, who never saw him cry ever, got afraid now. And he said to the big muscle guys at the door, eject them now, get rid of these guys. Right? Eliezer takes out a Tanakh. He says, can I give you a present? I want to give you a Tanakh. He says, no, I don't need one. I have one already. I'm going to tell you what happened. He tells him, after the first Lebanon war, an Israeli soldier showed up. He was couldn't handle the wars anymore, and he was searching for himself. So he converted to Christianity, didn't find any nechama there, didn't give him any consolation, chucked that one. He tried Islam, didn't work for him either, chucked that one. So he came to India looking to find himself, but he was not satisfied. So he says to the two Hasidim, he came to me and he said, why is it that I'm not at peace with myself? Is it because of this Tanakh? Now, if you know, when you enter the IDF, what's the first thing they give you? They give you a little book of Tanakh. My father-in-law showed me his. You get a Bible. He goes to the Swami. Maybe it's this Bible that's causing it. Should I just throw it away and I'll get rid of this heavy feeling? Why do I feel so troubled? And the Swami said, I told him, no, don't throw it away. Give it to me, I'll take it. And I will tell you, he says, you know what I told him? He's telling the two Hasidic men the story, what happened. He says, I told the Israeli soldier the story of Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Akiva, on the last day of his life, was skinned to death. All his life, he said, I never could understand what it means, with all my being. And then Rabbi Akiva says, I get it. That you should be willing to give up your life for Hashem. And Rabbi Akiva was so happy to give up his life to sanctify Hashem's name from the Romans. And I told the soldier, this is the Swami, that suffering is not a punishment, it's the path to spiritual greatness, if you don't understand what suffering is. And he looks at them and he says, I could tell you, I don't know who he is, but I guarantee you, he went back to Israel, and he's an Orthodox Jew today. I give you my word. And now, this man set himself up into a trap. He goes, Eliezer looks at him and says, okay, it's your turn. You're 93. Do you want to be cremated with your ashes thrown into the Gandhi River? Come back. Do tshuva. Hashem will take you. Come back. Now this episode is being watched by all these people. Come back! As they're dragging them back away. In April 2010, he died. He died a guy. He didn't merit to do tshuva. It's not a guarantee that anybody gets it. You have to be able to accept it, to understand it, and to know it's a special thing. Every one of us has a pintel yid, a soul, a spark in our soul that can never be snuffed out. No matter how far a Jew can go, how distant he becomes from Hashem, he can always be ignited if there's a ratzon. En davar omed bifnei haratzon. Nothing stands in the way of a good attitude, of a desire. Unfortunately, every one of us also has attendants or gabayim, the Yetzer Hara, who work to keep that pintel yid from being fired up. And Hashem sends us messages. Sometimes it's a tragedy. How many times in my life I saw this? So many times growing up. I was lucky, I was born modern Orthodox. I saw guys come in to say Kaddish that could not utter a word in Hebrew. A word. But they were so careful to make sure they came to shul every day. By the end of the year, they were fluent in Hebrew. 3-4 years later, unrecognizable. They were regular Yidden. Sometimes it's something bad that happens in our life. Sometimes it's just an event that takes place, that Hashem sends us. Someone that we meet. An airplane episode. A vacation that wakes us up. Because Hashem sends all types of messengers to get our attention. But guess what happens? The Gabayim, when they see that we're starting to grow, the Yetzer Hara within us, they start to wave their hands. No, get away, right? You don't have to go to that class. You're tired tonight. You had a long day. Don't go this year. You'll go tomorrow. Yetzer Hara has all types of tricks to stop us. Just try that food tonight. Tomorrow you'll eat kosher again. Right? That's what happens. Like the attendant in this story. They go to work. It takes courage to fight off these attendants. To realize they're not here to protect us. They try to fight us. The Jewish spark, the Pintel Yid in each of us is waiting to be burst with joy, with love. Hashem said about human beings, Ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra min urav. The man's heart is evil from his youth. He saw that people, after the Mabul, all the sins that took place in the world, the theft, the extortion. During the month of Elul, the Yetzer Hara allows us to serve Hashem. Okay, you want to go to Slichas, no problem. You want to take on another share, so sure. I get it. You're going to try to stop and not speak so much Lashon Hara. You'll be a little more careful with your kashrus. Right? But as soon as Yom Kippur is over, okay, let's go back to our way. We have to be careful. Don't fall for that. If you take on a small commitment, and we're going to get into that a little bit today, try to hold on to it. They speak out a story about two cities on opposite sides of the Russian-Polish border. There was a Jew who wanted to try to sneak his stuff across the border. He stood for a few moments. He saw that the border patrol guy wasn't looking, and he started to make a dash across the border. As the poor Jew was about to take his last steps to clear the border, the guard ran up to him. Hey, what you got there? Let's see what you have in the bag. The Jew began to tremble in fear. The guard took out his sword, and he said, the Jew looks at him, you're such a wicked man. Why do you come to the last minute now to stop me? What's that all about? Don't think that's the Yetzer Hara, that we've won the battle. That it's clear sailings. Because sometimes the Yetzer Hara will let you do what you want to do for a little bit, and then he attacks. So it's important that we have to have our support mechanism, our yedidim, our friends. Learning together with people is one sure way to be strong, because each one supports the other. Each one holds us up. Not every one of our days are going to go the way we want them. And that's why it's important to be part of a chabur, to be part of a shir, to be part of a shul. That keeps us afloat when we have some of our moments that are, not so easy for us. And sometimes it takes a little bit of mesiras nefesh. A woman in LA writes, 43, never married, no children. How many times can I come to shul on Rosh Hashanah and ask for the same thing and get the same answer every year? How many times? Her name was Diane Faber. There I was, 43 years old, not married, sitting in the Ezras Nashim, when I saw two young girls, daughters of friends of mine, Sarah and Tova, both 18 years old, or 19, fresh from seminary from Yerushalayim, davening next to me. And they were standing. They were standing through Chazar Sashatz of Rosh Hashanah. I knew why they were standing. I knew exactly why they were standing. You don't have to stand. That's not the halacha. But I knew why they were standing. It's an especially long tefillah, and it's considered a big merit to stand. And I know what they were standing, because they wanted to get married that year. They wanted to stand before Hashem and show them how sincere they were, how pious they were, with the hope that a little bit extra effort will do the trick and get Hashem's attention. As I sat behind these two girls, they were the only ones standing from all the women. I was jealous of them, jealous of their youth, jealous of their energy, jealous of their high chances of getting married that year. I said to myself, how better their chances than they are of mine. How lucky they are. I wish I had what they have. I wish I could do what they do. I'd envy their tefillos. And I believe that their prayers, their tefillos would be answered yes, and mine probably another no. And then I said to myself, they don't want to be married any more than I do. Their prayers are not any better than mine. They're just younger, a little stronger than me. And then I did something I didn't expect. What do you think she did? She stood up. I stood up! I stood up to show Hashem that my tefillos were as good as theirs. That my desire to get married was as good as theirs. To show Hashem, I'm not tired. I'm not old. I can become a mother. That I could do what they do. And I looked around in the women's gallery, there has this nashim. While everyone was sitting, and I was standing, and these two young girls were standing also. During the songs, I bent and I swayed. During the silent prayers, I cried. I pushed myself, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Later that year, Sarah, 18 years old, Tova, 18 years old, and I, 43 years old, were married within 6 weeks of each other. Two very lovely young women, and one woman old enough to be their mother. We planned our weddings together. We shared caterers, photographers, and lots of laughs as we danced together at Sarah's wedding, Tova's wedding, and finally my wedding. That was 2 years ago. Last year, as the Yom Kippur approached, I still had one tefillah left unanswered, and you can guess what she needs now. She's 44. I understood the numbers. I knew the statistics were against me. The reality that not so pashut to get pregnant at 44. But I was married now. And like most married Jewish women, I was begging for a child. Was my desire to have a kid any less than any Tova and Sarah? No. My desire is even greater because I need it more than they do. If I'm going to have a child, this has to happen this year. And I asked myself, could I do it again? Can I stand all of the Chazorah of Musaf like I did last year? I didn't have my motivators. They're gone. Sarah, Yerushalayim with her husband. Tova, Baltimore, Ner Yisrael Kolel. No one to egg me on. You got to get juiced. Kina Sofrim, we call it. A jealousy that's allowed. I'm on my own this year. I thought, can I do it? I tried. I made it through all of Rosh Hashanah. I felt good. I felt determined. I said to myself, anything is possible. But on Yom Kippur, my strength failed me. I stood, and I stood. And then just I had to sit down. I was wiped out. As I took my seat, I felt a sense of failure. What can I do? I'm not 20 anymore. I don't have the stamina. I can't do it on my own. I know standing is not required. It's not halacha. But I came to the conclusion last year, that's what made the difference. At the closing prayers of Ne'ilah, which will be on Wednesday, I stood on my feet again, along with the rest of the kahal. I knew everything was going to be decided at that moment for the year. And I was unsure if I had done everything that I could. Just before the end of the Ne'ilah service, I leaned over to my friend Judy, who was sitting in front of me, and I whispered in her ear, "Judy, I beg you, could you just ask Hashem for one more neshama this year? Just one more?" And then I burst into crying, fearing I had failed. A few weeks later, I learned why my strength had failed me. What can you guess? She was pregnant. I was expecting. That's why she couldn't stand on Yom Kippur. I learned that Sarah and Tova were also expecting, with our due dates lining up the same way our weddings lined up. This year, Sarah, Tova, and I became mothers. My husband and I were fortunate to share another season of joy with my two good friends. As the Yamam Noraim, as the high holidays approach this year, I wonder if I'll even make it to shul. I'm exhausted from night feedings. I worry that my baby daughter will disrupt the service. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it takes just a little bit of a push, just a little bit of sacrifice. That's what Hashem is looking from us. Yom Kippur is a day of miracles. Maybe we dirtied our souls. There's a layer of dirt and stain on our neshamas. On Yom Kippur, you can come and approach Hashem and talk to Him intimately about your hopes, your fears, your dreams. You strengthen your relationship with Him. You transform yourself into an ambassador of light. Someone asked Rabbi Miller, my Rabbi, why can't we eat but? He says, it would distract you from the process of what you're supposed to do. You need to be totally focused on one thing that day, connecting to Hashem. If we allowed food, not the same thing. This requires you to be totally, 24 hours, you're glued in. You and Rabbi Shalom. Yom Kippur screams out to us, take the holiness of the day with you throughout the year. Be a spiritual seeker. In yeshiva, my yeshiva days, you call that person a mavakesh. That guy's always looking. When I was in Chaim, Berlin, a mavakesh was a higher term than a tzaddik. A mavakesh never stops looking, never stops seeking, never stops wanting to grow. Now, let me hear that Dvar Torah. What did the Rebbe say? That's a mavakesh. Make yourself grow. To be alive means that you're growing. Some of us are not growing. We're zombies. We're like robots. And it happens like the Rav said, it happens to the best of us. We take 3 steps back and we go into the silent Amidah and we take a trip to LA. And then before we know it, 3 steps back and it's over. So we realize that we have to work on ourselves. We need to be accountable for our days. Our days matter. There was a phenomenal yeshiva called Talmud Torah of Kelm. It was considered a Musar powerhouse. The Kelm Maggid got up to speak. Imagine, he says, a baskol, a heavenly voice proclaims, all the people in the cemeteries, get up. You have a half hour to acquire as much Olam Haba as you can. So we go to the cemeteries and they stop popping out of their plots. All the dead bodies in the cemetery starting to turn life. People are running. This woman used to do chesed to old people, so she runs to feed another old lady in a nursing home. This guy was to learn Gemara. So he opens up another Gemara. This one was a chaver Tehillim. He says, I have a half hour, let me knock out as many kapitel Tehillim. This one loved Chumash with Rashi. Imagine if I went over to one of those people and said, hey, do me a favor, what did the Philadelphia Phillies do yesterday? They win and lose. Get away from me! What are you, an idiot? I don't have time for that right now. Right? That's how we have to approach our life. Every minute has to matter. Not I'm going to shul and Tesla stock went up or went down. Who cares? Is that relevant? We have to treat it as if the Kelma Tzaddik told us. Imagine you had a half hour to live. The Maggid then paused and he said, that's a lesson to us to make sure that we make the most of our time in this world. In the video which we're going to be reciting, it says, V'chiper ba'ado, about the Cohen Gadol, u'ba'ad beiso. He should atone for himself, and he should atone for his house. And then again, another pasuk, V'chiper ba'ado, he should atone for himself, u'ba'ad beiso, and again for his house, u'ba'ad kol kahal Yisrael, for the entire nation, the entire Jewish nation. Chazal tell us in Yuma, the famous Gemara that deals with Yom Kippur, that the Cohen Gadol has to confess his own sins so that he'll be free of sin when he asks Hashem to forgive the Jewish nation. I can't come dirty and ask you, Hashem, to help whiten the Jews. I have to first clean myself up. Rabbi Yashiv asks a beautiful question. Why does it have to tell me several times he shall atone for himself? I know already. Several times. Atone for himself and atone for his house. Atone for himself, for his house. I know already. He says something beautiful, Rabbi Yashiv. This is Rav Chaim's father-in-law, Rabbi Shalom. I could see you're cheap, and I could see you're dishonest, and I could say you're not friendly, but I'm the best guy in the world. You understand? It's so easy to fling remarks at others and see the inadequacies of other people, but us, no, we're righteous in our own eyes. And the lesson here, the Torah has to go out of his way to make sure the Cohen Gadol, you got to work on yourself. We have to work on ourselves. We're responsible to work on ourselves first. Are you capable of owning up to it? Can you own up the fact that you have a problem, that you are weak at something, or are you constantly passing the buck to other people? Yom Kippur is asking us, don't blame others. Look at yourself in the mirror. What do you have to fix? Don't worry about him or her. Focus on you. That's why it says several times, Kohen Gadol, Chaper ba'ado. First take care of you. Because human nature being what it is, we like to first look at others. You know? How many times has a rabbi gotten up to try to give a guy a message that he comes to shul late? But he's not telling him, he's not going to tell him in the middle of his speech that he's the guy. But he's trying to hint it to him. So after shul, he walks up to him and says, Yossi, was it a good speech here? When are they finally going to get it? These guys. He doesn't even know he's talking about him. Because people don't see any weaknesses in themselves. That's what happens. We have to be careful. We have to make sure that we're looking at ourselves. You know, very interesting. Rav Shach, who lived in Bnei Brak, was once walking with his Talmidim. And what's the next town over? Ramat Gan. So he asks a question. He asks his Talmidim, why is there Shmir Shabbos on this side of the Givul and no Shmir Shabbos on that side? Why are people keeping Shabbos in our city and not keeping Shabbos in Ramat Gan, next door? And one of the students answered, Rebbe, that's very simple. Because here's where the boundary. Our boundary of our city stops here, and Ramat Gan starts here. No, he said to his students, that's not the reason why we keep and they don't keep. He said, you know what? If we would be stronger and more careful in our Shmir Shabbos, it would hit the other side. We're not doing enough on ourselves. We're worrying about ourselves only. If we would be more careful with Shabbos and wanting to care for others, it would move. And Shmir Shabbos would extend beyond the boundary of just Bnei Brak. It would go to Ramat Gan. We're not doing enough to help others. If we strengthen ourselves, automatically we're going to strengthen the other Jews. It's not because of the boundary. No, that's not what it's about. It's because our Shabbos observance is not as strong as it could be. If it was better, these Jews over there would be influenced by us, and it would change. So, what are some critical takeaways? Number one, think long term. Life is short. We have to have clear goals. What is my goal this year? Rav Shach was a Gadol Hador. You know what his goal was 1 year? And he knew it by heart. I'm going to bench this year from a Bir Cohen, from a siddur, and only first paragraph. Something small, quantifiable, and very doable. Don't say I'm going to learn Shas this year. It's not going to happen. Take on something small, something quantifiable, and something you can commit to doing. Here's the Gadol Hador. He knew Baruch HaShamazon by heart. And his Tanai for the year, what he accepted upon himself, I'm going to use a Bir Cohen, and I'm going to require myself to look at it for the first paragraph. Because he was used to doing it by heart, and he felt he could do a better job if he looked inside the Bir Cohen. 2, we need a plan. If you went to a bank, he's not going to loan you money, the officer. Show me your business plan. What's your plan? You're going to approach Hashem. You have to have a plan. Sit down tomorrow before Yom Kippur. How do I want to approach Hashem? What's the plan? I'm going to commit to X, Y, Z. And I'm going to ask Hashem to extend me credit. But I got to show him a plan. I'm going to go to Rabbi's Tuesday night Mishnah's class. I'm going to take on a Chavrusa Sunday morning. I'm going to sponsor, eggs and breakfast for Sunday. Whatever it is. What's the plan? Write it down. Again, small steps. That's very important. Know yourself. Every one of us here has a strength in their character that they could use in their Yiddishkeit. What is it about you that you feel allows you to contribute to your community in some capacity? I remember Moshe Meir Weiss, he's a great man, rabbi. I was zoche to get him married 2 years ago. I was a shotgun for the second time. He told us, do something for the kahal. I don't care if you mix the tuna fish for shalosh shudas. He says, why? Because when Hashem has to decide on life and death, he looks down and he says, they need him. I can't take him away. She does the books for the school. I can't take her away. He mops the floor. Whatever it is, do something for the community. That's a guarantee. That's long life. Because he can't take you out. You're part of the team. I can't take the team apart. That's fantastic thinking. Study Torah goes without, saying, be grateful. One of my favorite things that I love to say after Aleinu Shabeach every day, I brought a sample, and I can probably get you copies, is the thank you card. I love it. It's so important to be grateful. So important. I try to almost every day after Aleinu in the morning to say this card. Right, Zach? So, very important. If you need, I'll figure out, I'll get you some copies. Gratitude is key. And work on bitachon. Trust in Hashem. Don't worry. Hashem's got your back. I got to share an amazing story with you in Israel. A man writes, I went with the minyan to Har HaMenuchot. Har HaMenuchot is where the mountain that has all the cemetery, all the graves in the Yerushalayim. It was my father's 20th yard site. To say Kaddish at my father's kever. About 50 feet away on the road in the cemetery, a car comes. A young man drives up in a car. He takes out a red carpet. He rolls the red carpet from the road right to a certain kever, a certain tombstone. He then takes out a large bag from the trunk. He unfurls a huge sign and he attaches the sign to 2 big poles. He gets back in the car and he drives away. And we're wondering what is going on here. So I sent one of my grandsons, the man said, to go, see, what is it? What's going on? Tell us what's written on that sign. I couldn't see. The kid ran down the mountain, and he went, and he came back. He says, "Nu, Zevi, ma kotev po? What's written over there?" It says in Hebrew, "Will you marry me?" What's going on? Will you marry me? What in the world was going on? So I said to him, "This guy playing a joke? Let's go here, tear the whole thing apart." This is a disgrace. He thinks he's playing a joke in the cemetery. So one of my friends who came, he says, no. If we're going to tear up some private property, we don't want to do that. We can get arrested. 10 minutes later, the car comes back where the red carpet was, started. The door opens. Out of the car, the passenger saw it. A young woman steps on the red carpet. She looks emotional. They walk down the red carpet to the grave. As we watched, she flung herself on the kever, crying. So we said, enough already. We need to know what's going on here. This is too much for us. So our whole group went down, and we're staring at this young man and this young woman as if what is going on here? And they're looking at us and we're looking at them, and they decide to tell us the story. Listen to her story. The young woman began to tell her story. I come from a Haredi family. And not just Haredi family. I was the daughter of a serious Talmid Chacham, from whom nothing existed in the world but two things. My father davened and learned. That's all he did. Davened and learned. My mother was very righteous, a teacher in seminary. We were 10 children in my family. I'm number 4. I was raised in a very, very protected home. There were no non-kosher phones, no from newspapers, no from magazines, nothing. Our life centered on two things, Torah and Chesed. That's it. My brothers learned Torah. My father, Torah. Shabbos table, only Divrei Torah was spoken. Not Trump, Clinton, and all that stuff. Nothing. When I was 14, I started going off the derech. How did it happen? I don't know. I can't blame anyone. Overnight, I turned from a shy girl into a teenager. At 14 and a half, I was finishing elementary school. I started disappearing and doing all types of bad things. My parents had no idea. No idea. I was accepted into one of the top high schools. That doesn't accept anyone. In Israel, sometimes you need protection to get into the better Beis Yaakovs and better yeshivas. But I wasn't going to have a problem. My father was a major league Talmid Chacham. My mother was an outstanding educator. My acceptance was guaranteed. There's a shoo-in. It didn't take me for more than a month to be caught doing something that they couldn't ignore, and I was expelled, which was a shock to my parents because all my brothers and sisters were goody-goodies. We were a model home. I remember the day my parents, after I was kicked out, they said to me, Galit, makara, what happened? I remember how I answered them back with chutzpah. It's not your business. I'm not telling you. I don't think my father ever dreamed that any of his kids would ever speak to him like that in his life. The next morning, my father said to me, I want to take a walk with you. And he told me, your mother and I have decided, we thought about it, we did a cheshbon nefesh, we're not going to get angry, we're going to do whatever we can to help you and support you. We feel bad that you were hurting inside. The point is, my father said, we're not fighting you. Instead, we'll try our best to help you. You're our daughter, we love you, we don't blame ourselves. All we want to do is get through this together. Ladies and gentlemen, this is A+ chinuch. A+. He hugged me, he gave me money, and he said, we're waiting for you at home, Galit. I promise you, nothing's going to change. From here on in, I began a journey of destruction. Within a month, I went from being a nice, frum, religious girl to being completely secular. Years later, I was thinking about it. I started listening to Goyish music on Shabbos. And I had it blasting at home. Now imagine, you live in Geula Mei Sha'arim, and you have 10 children, and you're a Talmid Chacham, and you have a daughter blasting, I don't know, Beatles, I don't know. Could you imagine? Just, I don't know, think of any, pop music out there. Parents didn't say a word. And I was evil, she writes. I could have made life terrible for my parents. My father went for a walk with me twice a week. Now here he is. He's wearing a black kapata in Yerushalayim. She's wearing cut-off jeans. She's got pink and blonde hair, a little nose ring over here, ding, a little tulle of a shirt, and he's walking with her twice a week because they have their regular walk every Tuesday and every Thursday. And he's a Talmid Chacham, dressed like a Talmid Chacham. Then my brothers and sisters started to get married. I was expecting them to come to me. Oh, you want to come to my wedding? You got to dress b'tznius. Not one brother or sister said a word to her. Come whatever you want, just any way you wish. Nobody said a word to her. 10 years passed. Over those 10 years, I moved away. I was living in Tel Aviv. And then one day I said to myself, I want to go back to my family. So I told my therapist, who was not religious, I want to go back to my family. I want to become religious a little bit again. So it began a period where I became a secret Jew. I began to daven, keep Shabbos, do mitzvahs, in secret. Not because I was afraid of the non-religious Jews and they would make fun of me, because I was afraid of myself. I became more religious. I returned to the days of my youth when I was a kid. I reconnected with my siddur. I davened, I said Tehillim, I kept halacha, Shabbos. I remember the first time I kept Shabbos in 15 years completely. I pictured my parents seeing me, I told them I came back. And then it was the week before, I planned to tell my parents, Motzei Shabbos, that I was now from. I counted down the minutes. I couldn't wait because I was going to call my parents and tell my parents, I kept Shabbos for the first time in 15 years. But before I could pick up the phone rang. My mother was on the line, Garit, I'm in the hospital with Abba. I raced to my car. I drove to Hadassah Hospital, where I was told that my father had a heart attack and was taken by Hatzalah, and he was in the ICU. The tension grew. An hour later, the doctor came out and gave us the news no one wanted to hear. My father had returned his neshama to his creator. We all cried. But I started shouting and screaming, Abba, Abba, why'd you have to go now? I wanted to show you that I'm a good girl, that I came back. And I fainted in the funeral. My mama told me he may not be alive, but he sees everything. And he hears everything. And it took me 2 years and it became completely from. These past 2 years, I started entering the world of Shidduchim. 2 months ago, this man, David, that you see in front of you, was suggested to me. He went through a similar process of mine. He grew up in a religious home, went off to derech, but he didn't have the family support that I had. His parents were not like mine. Today, after a year engagement, he told me that he wanted to show me something. I didn't know what he was talking about. So, he went, and then he came back, and he came to get me. And he brought me to this place, Har HaMenuchot, where my father is buried. And we stood by his grave, and he said to me, I know, Galit, that at your father's grave, the most important place in the world for you is the best place for you and I to get married. And I'll propose to you right here. Let my father see from Shemaim the special way he treated me, the sensitivity he showed me, even though I didn't deserve it and I made his life miserable. I've gone back, Abba, to being the daughter you always dreamed of. Mitzvah observant, modest, happy, and accepting of myself. Dear Abba, I'll come again to invite you to my chuppah so that you'll be present at my simcha, and I promise you, I'll never forget you. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a great opportunity tonight to connect, to get sensitized for Yom Kippur, to walk away with some good ideas. I thank you so much for coming. It energized me as much as I was able to energize you. May I wish upon us we should all be sealed in a decree of life and health and goodness and children. Those who need to get married should get married, should have children, should have parnasa. And Be'ezras Hashem, we should greet Meshach Tzidkenu B'Ram Amen. Thank you.